This episode is sponsored by Active 911, a respected leader in the emergency communication and software field, providing alerting, mapping, and scene resources for over 500,000 first responders worldwide. Now, as you know, I only bring sponsors on this show who are A, coming from an altruistic place, and B, truly bringing solutions to problems. And the origin story of Active 911 begins with volunteer firefighter and tech entrepreneur Joseph Sullivan. After missing a critical call from a dispatch error, Joseph set out to create a solution to ensure that we are not only dispatched on time, but also provide us with resources and information for the call and location. So there are 3 different products under the Active 911 umbrella. The first is Active Alert, a dispatch system integrated into a CAD connection, providing fast, reliable alerting, maps, data, pre-plans, hydrant locations, and even the locations of incoming units and their specialties. The second arm is Active Comms. Now, many of us have experienced problems when it came to communication using our traditional radios, so Active 911 found a way of tapping into the incredible capabilities of modern-day smartphones and integrate that into our communication, providing both increased range and low latency. So to learn more about Active 911 or to try their free trial, go to active911.com. And if you want to hear more about the origin and spectrum of products that they offer, listen to episode 1243 of the Behind the Shield podcast with the creator and founder, Joseph Sullivan. Welcome to the Behind the Shield podcast. As always, my name is James Gearing, and this week it is my absolute honor to welcome back onto the show veteran firefighter, performance coach, and tactical performance consultant, Jorge Carvajal. Now, in this second conversation, we discuss a host of topics, from his transition out of the fire service, his reflections on the pandemic, the importance of fitness standards, training the tactical athlete, injury prevention, mental health, and so much more. Now, before we get to this incredible conversation, as I say every week, please just take a moment. Go to whichever app you listen to this on, subscribe to the show, leave feedback, and leave a rating. Every single 5-star rating truly does elevate this podcast, therefore making it easier for others to find. And this is a free library of well over 1,200 episodes now. So all I ask in return is that you help share these incredible men and women's stories so I can get them to every single person on planet Earth who needs to hear them. So with that being said, I welcome back onto the show, Jorge Carvajal. Enjoy. Well, Jorge, I want to start by saying thank you so much for coming back onto the Behind the Shield podcast. We last spoke on 2017, episode 52, and now I'm on episode...
That long ago?
Yeah,
wow.
Now I'm on like 1250 at the moment, so a long, long time ago. Now, we've talked ever since, of course, but one of the conversations we've had the last few years is once you retire, obviously we'll be able to have another conversation, not that you couldn't speak freely before, but even speak more freely. So I want to start by welcoming you back onto the show.
Well, thanks. Appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
One thing I love to do with anyone that hasn't been on for a few years is revisit COVID as an icebreaker. My perspective was, as we went into this, it soon became a very polarized conversation, and the well-being of the nation was almost lost in this extreme left, extreme right rhetoric, pro or vaccines or masks or Chinese conspiracies. And we had such an amazing opportunity to really look at the nation's health and make changes as we came out. We've got 75% of the country that's obese or overweight. We've got an opioid crisis. What are some of the things that we can really learn from this pandemic as we move forward? And through my eyes, at least, I really feel like that amazing opportunity was completely lost. And we came out the other end not really changing anything, it's making a real dent in the nation's health. That's James Gearing's perspective. So
Right.
I'd love to hear your experience, especially obviously you were still in uniform then, the kind of pandemic itself, anything you want to pull from that. And then, what, if anything, you feel like we should have learned from it that wasn't.
I think one of the things it did is push people inside, right? And so in pushing people inside, the whole aspect of let's just talk about what we're kind of connected to in many ways is fitness, is understanding that pushing people inside changed the dynamic of what fitness was. All right, it's no longer this cohesive group effort thing. It was the garage gym resurfaced. It was just part of somebody's house. Now it became the place, right? The cave. So I think that was probably a huge thing, just putting people inside with respect to just fitness and protecting yourself and not wanting to spread things. From department wise, I had a conversation the other day with somebody who was talking about how financially they were affected. It was a fire department guy, how financially they were affected. And we were talking about, COVID. And I remember sitting at the lunch table in a firehouse and the recall going off. And that was the first COVID call that we had. And we just looked at each other and said, here we go. That call was almost like like a hazmat call, right? Not just your regular call. It was, do I have the appropriate gear? Do I have all the things that I need? And then the timidity in actually crossing the threshold of the hallway, because it was an apartment building, into the room to treat the person. And I don't remember what the call was, but the fear of, okay, now it's real, right? You read it, you've seen it on the news, and now you're actually going and responding. We were all scared. There was a lot of fear in the response. There's a lot of also anticipation of what does this look like, or does it change the dynamic of how we treat people? Does it change the protocols? And the answer to all of the above is yes, 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 yes. And it was trying to still be the voice of reason when somebody has an issue that they had to call 911 for, but still be in that protective, especially as an officer, that protective mindset of you. Do we double glove, right? Do we put gloves on them? Does everybody get a mask, right? Nobody knew what to do. The truth is, we had protocols, but some of them were kind of asinine, and some of them went over to the point where it was too protective, and people felt alienated by that. I mean, we came in almost with Tyvek suits and booties and masks and stuff like that, and then had to call another unit to get deconned. It was we kind of pushed this envelope that we've never had before, and I don't really think it was really it served the public, but I don't know that it really helped them. Here, these guys look like spacemen now coming to take my blood pressure and tell me that I have to go to the hospital, and then that was a whole different protocol, taking them to the hospital and what they had there. It was different. We learned to be somewhat uncaring and more overprotective. And I don't really think that did us a solid with respect to the fire system and what we did. It was just very, it was hands-on, but it's really hands-off at the same time. If that makes any sense?
Absolutely. Well, talk to me, that was the beginning. So what was the evolution then? Because I think everyone pretty much that's come on this show said at the beginning, we took it seriously. We didn't know this was what level of threat this was. So no one went in, licking people's faces on day one. There was an element of caution, but here in Florida, especially with DeSantis, it's one of the good things he's done. It was a slow opening of the tap again. All right, we're going to give it a few weeks. All right, it seems to be not too bad. All right, restaurants you can open. Okay, gyms you can open, but you've obviously got to have these stipulations of distance and some of these other areas. And the takeaway as we progress through in Florida that year was, okay, of course this is a real thing, but underlying conditions seem to be a big part of whether this hits you hard or not. And there are some, ages that don't seem to really be affected, i.e. the children. And so, everything shifts. And even at the beginning, there was the whole exposure thing. Well, George was exposed, so that means that everyone around George has to all go home. And then they realized that the numbers don't work for that.
Correct.
So then, okay, we'll scratch that. George can come back in because we need George. So what did you see over that kind of year and a half as far as the kind of metamorphosis from that high level of fear day one to, let's say, a year, 18 months later?
So I call it the high-low. Right. It was very, very high anticipation of exposure and transmission and everything else at the beginning, to low. Yeah, no, all this is kind of BS, and this is not the way this works. As we became more in tune with it, more educated on what it was, we cleared entire fire stations, literally, because somebody came to work and they had some symptoms, and if you had symptoms, you had to call the department nurse, and the nurse then sent you to get tested. Well, if that person made a phone call back to the battalion chief and said, "Hey, I tested positive," then they looked to see who was on that truck. So they were giving 7 to 10 days before they got back. And of course, it's this multiplication thing, right? It's part of what the pandemic is that one person rode overtime in another truck in another division, another battalion, and did 2 overtimes. So that's potentially 7 to 10 people. But he worked at the station, so that's 3 shifts. You can see how this goes, and on and on and on, until we start to realize, like, what are we doing? We're almost browning out stations because we can't man them because everybody's going home because of COVID. But nobody had COVID. You just work with somebody who had COVID. So high level of alert and awareness in the beginning, and then later if you tested, you had symptoms and you tested positive, you went home. Nobody else got sent unless you had symptoms. Before, it didn't matter if you had symptoms, you got sent home anyway. And for most people, like, okay, I got a 10-day vacation. You couldn't come back. And then we had the problem of, well, how do we pay these people, right? It became a financial issue. And that changed things really quickly. Because the county and municipalities, like, well, what are we doing? How do we pay these people who are not working? Yes, the government's going to pay, but if you remember, the government only paid for a certain point. At some point, those COVID payments stopped. Now the department had to bear the brunt of the financial aspect of it. So interestingly, we initially started almost all those calls in Tyvek suits and duct tape boots and stuff. At the end, it was basically gloves and a mask. And we realized that the N95s was really the magic. The study was very clear that that's the mask that you needed to prevent any type of transmission. So we went with gloves and N95s, and that was it. We ran those calls as uncaring and unfeeling as we were in the beginning because we were afraid. That went away. We went back to being what the fire service is, right? Service, care, compassion, empathy. That returned, and that's the aspect that I like, because that's what and who we are. We were just scared, and like anybody else is scared, you sort of, everything's at an arm's distance because you don't know what you don't know. Once we knew what we knew, that aspect of the fire service changed again.
What about what you saw? It's interesting hearing all the stories from around the world as far as what was truly witnessed. So, for example, it didn't actually hit the homeless very hard. I think this was, if I'm not mistaken, this was someone from Skid Row. But there were parts of LA where they had a hotspot, and some of those firefighters were talking about, we literally were bringing in, COVID patients that were dying in the back of the rig or when they got to the ER. So those existed. But I had far more where, that they didn't see what they were being told on the news. And Beaver Fit, for example, the fitness equipment company, I had Tom Beaver on, and they actually built the morgue in London, and they ended up disassembling it because they never even had a single, body go into this extra morgue. So that's great news. No one's saying that's a bad thing. But everyone's personal personal perspective is different. Now, majority didn't seem to be as bad as they were. Some people were in those hot spots and they absolutely were getting hammered. What was your personal perspective in the Miami-Dade area?
I didn't see what the news reported with boots on the ground, right? I didn't see bodies being carried away. I didn't work in the hospital, so that's an N=1 perspective. But we had a building in our territory, it's a high rise. We called it the COVID building because 80% of the people in the building had COVID. These are people that were tested positive, primarily an elderly population, right? Not a transient, what do they call not a transit building, not a building that was there for snowbirds, right? Where it's 35% occupied off season. During the season, then it's higher. It's pretty much probably 70 or 80% occupied. The worst things I saw in that building, again, this is an 80% building, people touching buttons in the elevator or going to the laundry room, whatever it is, however transmission happened. The worst we saw were difficulty breathing and some kind of respiratory illnesses, things like that. Very minute, some transported. I like to transport those people because they're elderly already. Once we got to the hospital did have a ward of the hospital that they kept these individuals. And if you had sort of a triad, which was difficulty breathing, changing blood pressure, and I think it was, there was something else on triad, maybe chest pain. Those people with a triad, if they were over 80, some of the nurses said they don't come out of the hospital, right? These are these COVID patients that pass away. That is more anecdotal than anything because I never saw it, but that was something that they had apparently once you get to the hospital. And how many people did I take with severe difficulty breathing where their oxygen saturation was at 84? Very, very few. I would say the majority were above 90. Some were 88s. Not everybody had blood pressure problems, but I just didn't see it. I didn't see. We don't really have a huge homeless population, but we have some where you would think the transmission is higher, right? They're exposed. There's no gloves. There's no mask. There's, all these things going on, and we didn't see it. Then, not saying, and that's not a testimony to it didn't happen more than anybody else. But again, I offer an N=1 perspective, which we just didn't see it. We didn't see the mounting bodies or the body bags. We just didn't see that. During that time, I think I ran, 30, 40, 50 cardiac arrests. I don't recall a single one of those being COVID related. They were just cardiac arrests, as they happen. Some may have had difficulty breathing, but they had a history of difficulty breathing before COVID. So I started to keep a tally myself in my locker. I had a little post-it that I would write a cardiac arrest, and if it had these signs and symptoms related to COVID, and there weren't very many. There was probably maybe 10, 20%, but would that have been 10, 20% regardless because they had COPD or heart failure or something like that? So not that many. The things that we would see sometimes on the news, NBC News or ABC or CNN or something, the refrigeration trucks and outside. I went to the hospital a lot. I just didn't see that. Again, N=1 perspective.
Yeah, but those are important. And this is the beautiful thing. Like I said, we're now at over 1,200 episodes on here. That's post-COVID about 800 or so episodes. Soldiers, first responders, doctors, nurses, and we're hearing that. And like I said, there are people that were like, yeah, in our particular area, we were seeing it a lot. But one of the biggest takeaways from all those, professions that I've told you just then is that pretty much every single person that they lost to COVID had pre-existing medical conditions. And people would say, 100%. Oh, well, there was one guy that he was a triathlete. It's like, yeah, but there was still something inside that was, a weakness.
100%. Yep.
So
my experience.
So this is the thing. So I want to put this to you next then. You have this, amazing background, not only in our profession, but also in the strength and conditioning world, working with, special operators and Olympic athletes and all different types of people. The takeaway then should have been, if we're seeing comorbidities in most, if not all of the COVID deaths, we need to make the nation healthier. As we came out of this, again, not loading this question, what was your perspective of the kind of tailboard critique of this pandemic? And, are there any lessons that you wish we had learned, we had made front and center?
I think distrust, right? And just not trusting the word that was coming out, I think. There was what the news was saying. There was what we knew inherently with boots on the ground we're seeing. And there was this difference, right? It wasn't even close. And to piggyback on what you said, that never saying and won't ever say that didn't happen, but mirroring what you said, same thing is some of the things that we saw, I would say 100% were all pre-existing conditions. I had family members that one family member that got sick and had long-standing COVID, developed respiratory problems later, but he had diabetes, he had hypertension, he had some heart issues. So could we actually definitively, and I know my family asked me that question a lot, and the answer is I don't know. I just know he had pre-existing conditions, and that certainly is not conducive to being able to battle it and beat it. It was difficult because I wanted to give him a sure answer, and I didn't have that sure answer. But in looking back at those, we come back to the station after a call and discuss it. It was 100% pre-existing conditions. I just never had, again, I go back to N=1 because I like to make sure that when people listen, I am not speaking for the fire service. I am speaking for one person on one truck in one department, right? Literally the N=1. And we just didn't see those. I kept some of those stats myself because I like numbers and I like science, and I couldn't match up what I was seeing to what I was being sort of fed. And I say that with no timidity and full honesty, is I think we were fed a lot, and not saying that it was with a certain perspective or agenda in mind, just we were fed, and we were fed what people thought it was. I think people started going out and just doing their own research. The people that I really followed, whether it was on Twitter or something, were people that are very independent in their thinking and their journalism to try and get to the heart of the truth. What is really going on? Are we following the right rules, or are we just blanketly throwing stuff out and see what sticks, and then we'll go with that? And a lot of it was that. And how do we know that? Because subsequent to that, we realized, we made a lot of mistakes. There's a lot of things there we probably could have done different, and we didn't, whether it's conspiracy or agendas or whatever it was. I think I learned the best when I started just reading myself and started to think differently in terms of maybe this is not all what's going on here. Maybe there's something else here, and then they're riding that train to wherever it goes, if it makes sense.
I mean, like you said, the misinformation, the lack of trust. And as we came out the other end, because I stood in the middle. I was like, look, this is obviously a real virus. There's a lot of people, my friends are taking them to the hospital. Some of the guys I know are even taking them, and they die. Mm-hmm. So it is a real thing. But at the same time, there's also this complete correlation between underlying health and, and their ability to combat it or not. And, one, I'm sure you probably saw this too. One of the things that nauseated me with the journalists would be in the ER, and they'd be like, there's people in the hallway. And it's like, what are you talking about? There's always fucking people in the hallway.
There's people in the hallway all the time, right?
Yeah. So obviously you don't care normally about the workload and, the nation's ill health to the point that we're, just overrunning hospitals in any urban and suburban area.
And those
less.
Little things, not to interrupt you, but those little things are what happens when you sit in a fire station, right? 15 recliners, so you're watching the news and they show that, and look at the people in the hallway, and you realize, because you go to the hospital 10, 15 times a day, that this is a normal occurrence in every city in this country. Then you start, your red flag goes up and your disbelief begins, right? Because what they're reporting is not what's really happening. It's not what you see every single day. It's almost a sensationalism of, look at this small thing that's happening. No, it happens like that every single day in every ER in the country. We're overpopulated. We don't have enough ERs, don't have enough nurses, and all that plays into the sensationalism of what it becomes. But sitting there and watching this, and then of course we take this back to our homes, and then those people then spread it out to their friends and schools and other people. And there's this disbelief that begins, and it begins because what's being reported is not what's really being experienced.
Well, again, the through my eyes, we come out of this, and at this point, it's the left side, if you're choosing which wing of the same bird to focus on for a moment. And there, like masks and vaccines all the way, and this is how we do it. And we emerge with this huge lesson of, hey, okay, we need to make the nation healthier because that we will get the next virus. So here's our huge red flag. And they come out and they're like, we don't want to talk about it anymore. Then you go into the right wing of the same bird, and they're like, okay, we're going to make America healthy again, and rah, rah, rah. And then a year and a half later, all they've done is get rid of red food dye that was illegal most of the planet already. So this is what infuriates me. Neither side has shown any real interest in the actual health of the people. And there obviously are, agendas behind the scenes that people's lives and people's health are being secondary to power, greed, whatever it is. I mean, that's just blatant. That being said, if you were king for a day and you could change the environment in America to forge physical health, to forge better nutrition, to forge, a stronger immunity to the next thing, what would you change so that, imagine we did actually care and learn from these lessons. What would you actually change to start moving that needle back down towards a higher level of health for the U.S.?
I think take the focus away from the agenda aspect and just make it a priority. Make healthcare and just health and wellness in general available to everybody. Started in the schools. How many schools that a kid can take a note that says Johnny can't do PE, and parents don't want him to do PE for whatever reason. So Johnny doesn't do PE for, 10 years, 12 years, whatever it is. We need to get away from that. Certainly not helping society when kids aren't going around and just playing. We don't allow them to play in schools and things like that. So take the focus away from the agenda, and right or left, there are agendas, right? We can both agree on that. And we can also both agree that taking the focus away from that and putting that effort and that energy into just creating a better society, healthier society, by opening things up, making healthcare available to everybody. That is a long-winded podcast. Could last many hours, just that conversation alone. But make it so that it's more viable for those that can afford it. Just allow people the time. I know people that have told me we don't get any time at work to be able to exercise, but you have a $25,000 or 25,000 square foot training facility. Yeah, but we can't use it. It's for paying customers, right? Give people the ability, the lunch hour, and they go and make health a priority. We haven't done that. Right, we've made illness a priority, and during COVID the priority. Why don't we switch that a little bit and flip that on its back and make health a priority? We can. We have, we have the intelligence, we have the infrastructure, we have the financial resource to do it. We just haven't done it. And the small n equals 1 representation of that is your typical fire service, right? Your department, your station. Make that a priority. Health is not a priority in every fire department in the country. Just anybody that listens to this as a firefighter knows that to be true. The money and the resources or the money is put into the resources, not the people that handle those resources, right? The personnel. That's where you put your money. That's not where it's at. So changing that focus back onto people, not things, I think is going to be important.
The schools are such an important part of the conversation. I'm about to get a superintendent of a school who has brought on the MetFix, the Broken Science Initiative, Greg Glassman and Emily. They've got this whole, metabolic nutrition side to them now. And it's almost like an affiliate again. And he's got this in his school. So I've got him coming on. But this is the thing. If you look at Finland, I had Pasi Sahlberg on, who's one of their kind of advocates. So he's a Finnish educator. He became an expert in the topic and tours the world talking about their system. And they look at the child as the holistic child. So it's not standardized testing and punish the schools with the lower scores. It's the opposite. Support the schools with an environment that maybe doesn't set their kids up for as much success. And then, lots of recess, shorter days, and they smash everyone when it comes to the academic scores. Mm-hmm. And then you look at the motivation factor. Have you ever seen that documentary? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So you've got, that was the U.S. So in California, La Sierra High School, they had this progressive PE program where no matter you're the star quarterback or you're a flutist in the orchestra, you all do PE as a group, and there's 4 levels, and you can graduate to the higher level if you progress that way. But it wasn't an option. There wasn't any sick notes saying you can't do it. Everyone did it. And their academic scores went up, bullying went down. I mean, and the mental health probably was phenomenal amongst those kids. So those solutions are out there. Jamie Oliver, what he did with schools in the UK, they are out there, and they're actually money-saving initiatives, because when you have healthy, happy kids, they don't cost you as much through counselors and all the other things. Mm-hmm. So this is what's so maddening. No one has to invent anything. These countries around the world have already got the solution. We just have to have the humility to say, all right, the way we're doing it isn't working. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Who can we use as a blueprint and bring into the U.S.?
When I was at the University of Florida, there was a group of people, and there was Japanese students that were coming. I think they were high school age, maybe elementary to high school age. And they were being tested against some of the students in Gainesville. And what came about was, and it was more tested like intellectual testing, math, right? Science, biology. And they had higher scores than we did. What I found really, really interesting is that they had mandatory PE. They also had physical testing, and they kicked our butt physically. That's not a coincidence, right? Same age, same kind of grades, obviously different backgrounds. But the one common or the non-common denominator that they had was that some of the kids that were in the Gainesville schools were not doing PE for whatever reason, but they had mandatory physical education. There's a connection there, right? No question about it. And I left school, and that story always stayed with me, because I realized that it was a lesson of there's the physical qualities of running, jumping, carrying heavy things, squat, hinge. They were doing all those things, and we weren't. Does that open it up to create a better thinking mind, a better mind that absorbs things? 100%. And they proved it. I've never forgotten that story.
Interesting with Japan. Firstly, they had a wellness initiative, I think it was in the 80s or 90s, where they started to see the population's health trending. I think they got ahead of it super, super early. But they created a national program where they changed literally the portion sizes. And if you go to Japan, I lived in Japan for 15 months, they are quite small. And it's not like they're starving their people, but compared to what you get at Chili's,
sure.
a platter for 10 people for a person,
sure.
It's that, smaller, highly densely nutritious portion. Another interesting thing about Japanese schools, and I don't know if this is every school, but I've seen videos on this, is the kids clean their own school too. So now there's an ownership level.
Yes.
Yeah. So you think they're going to graffiti their own school if you got to clean it?
No, of course.
Absolutely not. So there's some cultural things in Japan that again, there's another area that we could learn from here. So this is the rising tide lifts all ships. If we just had the humility to ask these countries, how are you doing that thing that you're so good at? And we'll share how we're doing this thing that we're really good at. We would all elevate, but there's a lot of arrogance. And it's like, well, America is the best. Like, no, it's not. I hate to tell you,
right.
we're an amazing country. You and I have worn the flag on our shoulders, but there are areas that are, have room
100%.
for improvement.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. And going back to what you said about, obviously there's a pride in the school that you are learning it, but you're cleaning, right? Or many kids here, it's just a building. It's a building I spend, a certain amount of hours, 7, 8, 10 hours a day. And then I got to go. There's a difference in there. I saw ownership from those kids. Not that I saw it personally, but what I saw from the experience was ownership, complete ownership. But we're coming to America and just show what we have and who we are and what we got. And I hope that we learn from that. The school that they did the testing against was I think they call it it's like a experimental school, I guess. They test new things. It's part of the University of Florida's graduate program for teaching. So hopefully they got some experiences there that they went back and they put into the curriculum, or they became that microcosm of what became something hopefully a little bit bigger and better, which is maybe let's just keep physicality in schools and not just take away those things that I think might just help the brain develop, if anything.
Absolutely. Well, I want to transition back to your path. So when it comes to especially mental health, a lot of our men and women find it incredibly jarring when you've been part of this profession for 10, 15, 20, 30 years, and that's been your tribe, that's been your purpose, that's been your identity, and then one day that bay door closes for the last time. So what was your specific experience as far as your kind of off ramp, the leading up to, and then did you have that kind of jarring identity element yourself?
Oh boy. The word detritus, Josh Brolin from his book. When I read the book, it still stands out to me. Basically, it's the debris matter after something is used, right, and kind of discarded, right? That's sort of what it was. And that's exactly what it was, is you put in a certain amount of time, and over time, things start to change, right? The landscape starts to change. People are younger around the table, and the calls hurt a little bit more. That 2 or 3 calls after midnight ruins a week, not 1 or 2 days. We're not very good at that. We haven't learned that. And I think that it's a young man's game, right? We know that. But once you come to this demarcation in the sand and you cross it, there is a discarded aspect of that. And I think for many people, it is very, very difficult. I was sitting in an office once and a battalion chief came in, and we'd been friends for 25 years. He would take my stuff off the truck in the mornings. We were firefighters. Now he's a battalion chief. And I said, hey, you're leaving in 2 weeks. Like, how does it feel? We assume that it feels good. And he said, in a very serious tone, he said, I'm having a problem with it. And I was kind of taken aback. Like, what do you mean? He said, I was at Publix shopping the other day and off duty. And I realized that I'm going to be coming to the store now without the red cape. And the moment he said that, I understood what he meant. He said, yeah, I'm just going to be a regular civilian. everything changes when you take off that red cape. Like right now we have it. And I had never really heard it put that way. But I never seen someone with 2 weeks to go to be that conflicted is the word I'll use. He's very, very conflicted. And subsequent to that, I talked to him at 1 month. I called him about it every couple of weeks to see how he was doing. And he said he's still having 6 or 7 months later, still having trouble adjusting. And one of the things that we do is, and it happens in our department, happens probably in many departments, is my email was turned off before I actually left the department. So if I needed to email someone in personnel, I couldn't. And it wasn't very long before, maybe a day or two, but I remember going to work and trying to email somebody and I couldn't. I go, how does that work? I need to talk to somebody, right? To talk to this person. And thank God I had screenshot her email address and some other information, because there's no way for me to have looked her up. You can't look her up in, Google or whatever. And then after that, we have our department app, captain's app, lieutenant's app. You get removed from that. Now that is, as administrator of one of those captain's app, that was one of our rules, is once you get promoted or you leave, you're no longer able to access the conversations that we're having, which in our department, the tip of the spear are the captains. I would say, and I would venture to say in most departments they are, certainly in our department, I would say they are the tip of the spear, no question. A lot of things move and shake because of how captains like or dislike things. So I didn't take that personal. That was a rule that I implemented. And now I'm privy to the same rules. But it was difficult, right? The access of just talking to other coworkers at the same rank, just people that I knew, that you're cut off from that communication. You're cut off from pretty much 99% of the communication. People don't check in a lot for whatever reason. And somebody asked me that. And so, well, did you check in? And I was like, it's interesting because the answer is no. And my reasoning was, let them just leave in peace and, enjoy life. And now I realized that was wrong, that the right thing to do is, they'll live their life and let them enjoy those things, but keep in touch, right? Keep the connection, because the connection is everything in the fire service. So it's not like any other job where, you work for corporate America and you do your 30 years and you get your plaque and you go. This is different. There's a brotherhood, there's a sisterhood, there's this cohesiveness and connection that happens that probably doesn't happen in many other jobs at all, including law enforcement. It's very, very different, right? There's a brotherhood and a sisterhood there, but it's very different than ours. So it was difficult. I'm still finding it difficult. It's an adjustment. And so you dip your foot into Facebook groups or retirement groups and you kind of see what's going on. Or the other aspect of that is I've seen people disappear. There's people I haven't seen in 10 or 20 years that I knew and worked next to. They're just gone. They don't want any part of it. And I started to understand that a little bit more toward the end, that this is the reason why people disappear, is they understand this. Now, I was told this before I left, but it's not the same as when you actually leave and you experience it, right? Is the aspect of just leaving and kind of looking back and there's nobody there. And I think that that's super difficult for people, because there's every third day for us, 24 to 48, you're with the same group of people every single day. For us, it was 3 meals a day, traumas, deaths, cardiac arrest, children injured, drownings, all these things, day after day after day after day. And then it just stops. There's no gradual slowing. It just stops. And so I think that that's difficult for anybody. And again, I know people have told me that, they had an issue, but until you go through it, you realize it's very, very different It's different for everybody, but I think collectively, everybody has a very difficult time exiting. And we do not have a system to deal with that. We do not. We've had, I think in Miami-Dade, we've had, 12, 13 suicides. Some of those with 100% and those to be true. People that left and their identity was the fire service. And we may tell people, hey, learn a hobby or a skill so that, that the fire service is not your identity. It's very difficult for someone to even the fire department not be their identity. You've given 30 years to it. That is your identity. But not everybody has the emotional, the mental skills, I think, to try and circumvent those waters. And I think it becomes very difficult. The aspect of mental health comes in there, which is far and away much better than it was before. When I was teaching the Wellness Fitness Initiative class for the IFF, I think we had, maybe there was a very, very small chapter, 1 page on mental health. It just wasn't the focus. We didn't have that problem, so to speak. And over the years, it compounded and it became worse. But we don't have a system. When Captain Bill Gusson passed away, and I know you know Bill, Captain Bill, I think that was one of the most traumatic passing aways that we've ever had in the history of that department. He was an icon, right? A legend, someone that I knew personally. I saw him every single morning at Station 2 where we worked, and always challenged me to pull-ups. And that's what I knew of him. And at the end, I walked into a class, and if you know Bill, this 6'2", 200-pound guy, just a pillar of a man. And he was sitting with a red instructor's T-shirt in a class. And I thought it was the saddest thing I'd ever seen, because that's not who he was, right? It's a guy who wrote books and, thousands of articles on firehouse and fire engineering. And here he was teaching a class. I don't remember what the class, maybe wasn't a teaching class. He was just there as a student. But that meant he was off the trucks, right? He was no longer responding. Now he had a kind of a 40-hour job. Nobody teaches anybody that aspect of being moved from the aspect of operations to a 40-hour job, which inevitably, right? The inevitable step there is then leaving the job. And we had some grief counselors come, peer fitness counselors that were coming to the stations to talk about specifically that and skills. And the difference was that before, these peer counselors were civilians, right? And nobody talked. You're a civilian. You have no idea what I do, like zero. But these are peer counselors now that actually did the job. And it was better because they do the job, and they were there to kind of talk to you and navigate those waters. But sitting there and hearing those, the conversations, I realized that we don't have an exit program in the fire service. It sucks. There is no program. As you leave on your own terms, and when you leave, and I leave on my own terms, and when I leave, and you may get a party and I may not, or vice versa. And at some point, your emails get shut off. You get eliminated, deleted from your apps, and then you're a civilian. So you have a nice pension, right? I don't think very many people care about that when all of that has just been erased. We don't have a program to transition people into retirement. We don't. I've looked for it. I've wrote some notes on it. And when I've talked to somebody, I haven't talked to a single person in any department in this country that says, yeah, we have a great program. Palm Beach County, who is very forward. They were the two people that were their exercise physiologists were in one of my IFF Wellness Initiative classes for peer fitness trainers. They were in that class, and these two girls, and there's two women, I forgot their names, took that back to the department and built this icon of what I think is now a model program for the fire service in Palm Beach County. But one of their officers, I think he was a captain, we were talking about it. So, well, we have a system, and the system is we have this book where our retirees can access, and it's got pickleball, and it's got, James and George are going to go kayaking at a river on Saturday at 9:00 if you want to be there. So they had options for people to go and do things, right? Extracurricular activities. But what they didn't have, what nobody has, is an actual plan to exit. And going back to corporate America, there's an interview and you get your plaque and you're out the door, and there's like, okay, let me figure out what I do now. The fire service, because of the grit, the grind, the heartache, where you get indoctrinated into this thing where your soul is taken over at some point by the job, and then not really ever handed back to you. There's no plan to just exit into a normal aspect of society, right? It doesn't exist. And that is a focus that I have now, that I told the guys in my department, if anything, I'm probably going to come up with a PDF, maybe an ebook, make it available to people so that they get an understanding of, these are the things that are going to happen. These are some of the feelings. Yours may be different, but an algorithm, a step-by-step program on how to exit. We have our interviews and we have our protocol on 2 weeks before you want to retire. You send your email and you fill all these things, and people sign in for you so you can exit. You turn in your keys, your uniform. But there's no mental or emotional exit plan. And that is what the focus has to be now, because we're losing people because of that, because we don't have an exit program. People are just like, I just can't deal with this. And those aren't weak people. Those are people that didn't have the emotional or mental skills to do it. It doesn't mean that they're weak. They just didn't have those skills. But we can teach people those skills. We can make them a little bit more whole versus broken when they left. Again, going back to Josh's word, you feel like debris, right? Disintegrated, disengaged matter, used. And that's not a good feeling when you exit. A pension doesn't change that.
Well, firstly, I'm so glad I asked you that, because, you've probably been a voice for so many people who've transitioned out. And I didn't have a part either. I think they were glad when I left, but that was a different conversation, even Reedy Creek.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
But this is what's so important. And we'll get to the work week in a little bit. But, what I've realized, aside from the impact of sleep deprivation and shift work on our men and women, is at the front door, when you're standing in that academy in Hialeah, Miami-Dade, wherever you are, and you're in the orientation now, and you're on the drill ground towing the diamond, there needs to be a conversation. Now we understand the amount of childhood trauma that is in a lot of our men and women in uniform. That is a beautiful opportunity to have a positive conversation about performance. And from day one, say, the reason that you're standing here, the reason that you went through the rigmarole of fire academies and EMT schools and CPATs and written tests and chiefs interviews, is because there's things that have happened when you were younger that led you to want to be a protector, led you to want to, build an armor, all these different areas that can be viewed absolutely as positive. But if we bury them down, if we just say, all right, I don't want to think about it now, and we just get busy with the fire service, working shifts,
which is what we do.
That is exactly. And it's a coping mechanism as well, busyness. And we love the term overtime horror, but there's a psychological reason why that person doesn't want to go home with their family. So, now instead of burying it down and having a fractured foundation that will rear its ugly head one day, because we're going to add, organizational betrayal, trauma, shift work, sleep deprivation, all these other things on top, moral injury. Instead, at the front door saying, we want to start PTing your mind the same way as we're going to PT your body, and we're going to run stairs, we're going to drag hose, we're going to throw ladders, but we're also going to have X amount of counseling sessions through this year and then periodically throughout your career. So now you've normalized that conversation at the front door. You framed it as performance, not you are weak. Because if I want you to be, to have the right mindset after we've climbed 28 stories with 100 pounds of gear on, and then we get to that high-rise apartment, and then you're able to do a primary search in scary conditions. That requires a high level of mental, resilience and aptitude.
Yes, absolutely.
So if we do that at the front door, and then you've got a relationship with the counselor, and then anytime anything happens, you can hit it early rather than wait till it really explodes. You have then the same thing on the back end. As you are starting to get through that last year, okay, now we're going to talk about leaning into that again, because we don't want you to walk out the back door with a freaking, encyclopedia of horror in your head, and now you find yourself alone in an apartment. So let's start doing the same thing we did on your day one as we progress through the last year as well. So I think from a mental health point of view, aside from the tribe and, what is an occupation or some pastimes that you love doing that you can overlap while you're still in, but let's deal with it. Like, you've accumulated all of this stuff. Let's have this conversation so that we can start healing you on the way out too. So when you step out the back door, you feel like you are part of something, you value your service, and you're not, carrying this just bucket load of shit that you then sit with because you're not with your tribe and you're not running calls and you don't feel like you're offering value, and no one in Publix gives a shit what you used to do. And you have that crushing Jenga tower of trauma that sadly and Bill and many other people in our state succumbed to after they left the profession.
When you started saying that, what came to my mind was you're normalizing it. It's normal. This is what we do in Miami-Dade. This is what we do in Miami. This is what we do in Gainesville. This is what we do in Los Angeles, New York, right? Cleveland, Austin. It's normalized to be able to sit and talk and have those things. But when you bring that at the back end, the response is always going to be, where have you been for 30 years? I mean, what department do you work for, right? Well, I work in HR. And it reminds me of when we first started doing critical incident stress debriefing, CISD, after huge events, right? So our policy is that you have to attend, but you don't have to talk. So just sit and listen. The problem with that is the people that we're doing that were civilians, right? So we've had this incredible event where you and I bonded over some traumatic event, which is why we're there. But then we have this person from another department in the county come in and want me to open up my soul. That's not going to happen. It's just not going to happen. It's going to internalize, and that is just one that goes in there. And then subsequent to that, over, for me, 35 years, there's a lot of those, right? So you can't do that at the end. It doesn't work. It has to be normalized right at the beginning. Hey, we're going to have these conversations. Those same people today are peer counselors. They're firefighters. So I may be sitting across from somebody, maybe wearing a polo for the day, but the difference is that he does the job. I know he's been through these things. So when he asks me a question, we can have this response, right? It has to be normalized. And we have taken, Miami-Dade has taken a great step in trying to normalize those things by having more peer counselors. And I think it's a great thing. And my first kind of introduction to that was after the collapse, the building collapse, right? Which was right blocks from my station. I was on the second rescue truck that got there. The first truck was the actual platform that picked and saved a bunch of people from balconies. But it took me about 2 weeks. I didn't go home, I think 26 hours. Never got relieved, worked straight through. And then about 2 weeks later, it hit me. I couldn't sleep. I was very agitated. My normal routine was, and then I realized this is PTSD. I looked up PTSD and I read 10 things on symptoms. I had 9 of them. And it not been the first time in my career I had that, but I recognized it immediately, like there was something wrong. And on one of those captains app, somebody made mention about something, and I responded not the way I normally would respond. So you and I have been friends for many, many years. If I responded to you in a very abrupt, disrespectful manner, you know that there's something wrong because that's not who I am, and vice versa, right?
Yeah.
So somebody, one of those peer counselors or one of those captains contacted peer counselor and said, hey, one of our captains wrote something. I'm concerned. And I've never found out who it was. But he told me what he says. I know this guy. I know who he is. This guy is at the tip of the spear in this department. This is not how he responds. There's a problem. And again, we're 2 weeks away. So we figured, that's 2 weeks away. And so he called me and said, hey, I got a screenshot of your comment. And I'm like, oh boy. And I thought it was something more. It's a WhatsApp group that the administration has no access to. I knew that. And so I was a little bit perturbed that somebody screenshot it and sent it, but I understood later. And he said, hey, I'm just here. I'm here for you, man. I know this is not you. Are you okay? And because he was a firefighter and a brother, then I could feel comfortable in saying, no, I'm not okay. Here's what's going on. Had that been a civilian, there was no chance it would happen. I'm good to go. And the phone would have been hung up. But now I feel like that system is somewhat, and I'll use the word somewhat in quotations, normalized. It's not normalized yet fully the way it should be. But there's an avenue, an aspect of being able to reach out when something like that happens that we didn't have before. So credit to the department for taking a step to, hey, we have some issues. Again, we've had, I don't know any department in the country has had the amount of suicides that we've had. It's unmatched, I believe. And the department say the only way for us to do something here and maybe prevent this is get ahead of it. And you get ahead of it by having a program and a system, right? And if we have that, maybe we can help these guys. So it helped me realizing that we had something that we didn't have before, and I felt comfortable talking to him. And he called me several times after that. And I've done the same thing when I see a comment or I see someone come back from a call that's not how they normally respond. I make sure, hey, you good? Or sometimes I'd even ask you good. It's like, hey, let's talk. Because if you ask someone in the fire service, you're good, 1,000% of the time it's going to be, I'm good. So I learned not to ask that question. Hey, come up, back out to the patio. Let's have a little conversation. What's going on? And the conversation starts. So I think it's a brilliant idea to have it right at the beginning because it normalizes those peer counselors already seen, heard, felt, and experienced right at the beginning. So if they're seen, heard, and experienced throughout the process, it's just what we do, right? Where somebody else from another department is like, you guys actually do that? Yes, it's what we do. Again, if you do it at the end, I can see that. Where have you been for 30 years? You just show up now? Like, that's not the way it works. Nobody's going to open up at that point. It's just not going to happen. So I think normalizing the process in the beginning is what is going to save lives. I really believe that 100%.
Well, another area that, has been refuted for the longest time, and it's been, really maddening when it comes to cancer. People are talking about PFAS and carcinogens and benzenes, and they're absolutely right. That's a part of it, but ignoring the sleep deprivation element, even though we know World Health Organization classifies shift work as a known carcinogen. When it comes to the mental health side, a lot of the rhetoric was, well, George had Surfside, so that's why he's struggling. It's like, yeah, he had Surfside, but was that the straw that broke the camel's back after years and years and years of shift work on top of everything else? So talk to me about, your perspective now. We're seeing the 2472 really start to sweep through. You mentioned Palm Beach County. They officially go to 4 full shifts in January. not just from the mental health side, but also from the strength and conditioning side. You know, we know in the sporting world that rest and recovery is really where we process learning, where we rebuild whatever we broke down through strength training. So what is your perspective of this, 42-hour work week that's sweeping across our state now?
So I'm kind of in a unique position because I can see, and same with you, the fire department side, but also been a strength and conditioning coach as long as I've been a firefighter, right? And so sleep is the number one recovery tool, right? It's not Normatec boots, it's not post-workout drinks, it's not your legs up on the wall. It's sleep. Sleep is the number one recovery tool. So we know that in strength and conditioning very, very well. Okay. I have a sleep contract with athletes that I'll work with. And part of that is that they'll wear some kind of device that allows me to kind of look and see what's going on. I have to wear it all the time, but we need a pattern, right? I need some baseline to see when they go to bed, how long they sleep, total amount of sleep, those kind of things. Why is that so important to me? In fact, I probably won't take someone on if they tell me they sleep 3 hours a night. I can't help you. I can't work with you because I know you're not, whatever I throw on as far as load, you're not going to recover from it. So it's pointless. I'm already starting behind the 8 ball. Those are athletes that I prefer not to coach. And how many of those have I had over the years? A couple, not a lot. Whenever I said, hey, I won't coach you unless you sleep. Like you have to sleep. And 3 hours a night, I know that you've been sleeping 3 hours a night for 10 years. It doesn't work. And you can only get away with that at some point, and then you're going to pay. You're going to pay heavily. So most of those guys, we start working on little things like, yes, load and strength and conditioning, stronger, faster, all those things. But really sleep is a huge part of it. Once we dial that in, everything seems to get easier because now you can recover from the load that I'm giving you. I always like to say that I don't think I have ever worked with anybody who's been overtrained ever in my career. I have worked with thousands of athletes who are under-recovered. There's a difference, right? The fire service is literally the poster child for under-recovery because if sleep is that important and you're not sleeping, then you don't have to be a rocket scientist here. You're not recovering. Add another shift. If you do it, I've done many 48s where I didn't sleep the first day and I didn't sleep the next day. And so my entire week is shot. Now you can't make up that sleep. The sleep research is very clear. You can't make up that sleep. You're already in sleep debt, but then you go back to your regular shifts. So it's never been a priority because, well, that's what I did when I was a firefighter. I am now a fire chief. That is all I know. And so that's what we implement. And I did it, and so can you, right? That kind of game. It's change, right? That tune. And I know you've been banging this drum. We've had this conversation for years. That is a tool that is probably the most important tool in the fire service now. The additional hours, whether front end or back end, 24, 72, 48, 96s, the added amount of time. And by the way, most of those individuals that work for departments where they have added that extra day or 2 days, 48, 96 or 24, 72, that work 24, 48s, I would say the majority hated it, did not want. Why? Wanted change, right? We don't like change. Firefighters hate change. But they all thought it would make things worse, not better. Subsequent to those conversations, now it's, I can't believe we haven't done this before. I feel better. I can coach my kids' teams now. I can actually exercise continuously versus whatever I did before. It's 100% exception. I have never heard, maybe you can kind of throw in your experience because I know you've asked certainly in a lot of podcasts and talking to people about it. I've never heard anybody say this was a mistake. We made a mistake here. I've just never heard that. I've heard the opposite of this is the best thing that's ever happened. Again, you're sleeping, right? You work a 24-hour shift. Even if you have a bad night, you have a 24 hours off, then you have 2 days off to be able to implement and do things that you need to do like normal people, right? Just shop, clean, cook, take the kids to school, pick them up at school, work out, exercise, which is important. So I think it's revolutionary. I think the departments, I applaud the departments that are taking that on. There's a logistical aspect and financial aspect to that. I know that we sat down before I left and looked at, it's also a contractual item, right? And that's a whole different conversation. When you bring this to the county or the city and municipalities, they're going to counter back with something else. We'll give you the extra day. You're going to have to give me the third man off the rescue. Something like that, right? You're going to have to kind of rob Peter to pay Paul in a sense. But I applaud those departments that decided, hey, this is important. Let's do this because we value, and what's the number one commodity in the fire service? It's not trucks, it's not the equipment, it's people. People is the most valuable commodity, so you have to protect those people. And you have to plan to protect them, and that includes then changing the shift work. So there's less hours work continuously and more sleep. I read a comment, this is an ignorant comment, where I don't know if it was on one of your posts that had to do with time, where you say congratulations to this other department, because I know you do that, you recognize departments, and I applaud you for that. Thanks for doing that. This department is going to 24/72, and somebody made an ignorant comment like, yeah, it's more time to play cards. It's the misunderstanding of what the fire service is and what they do and how they do the time in between the calls. Everybody thinks it's playing cards. That's not really sure where that came from, but that's not what happens. Are cards played? Sure, but not in the context of what people think. But I really think that what it does is it's going to normalize circadian rhythms, and the normalization of circadian rhythm, it's going to reduce, not going to eliminate, but it's going to reduce the amount of cancer cases that we have. It's just better overall. Again, we know it to be true in strength and conditioning. We implement it with all athletes. There's no question about it. But the fire service is, well, we got to be up at night because, emergencies happen at night. Fair point. But we can assist those people by having them do less 24-hour shifts, not more. More is not helping anybody. Again, the number one recovery tool in the world is sleep.
Yeah, I see those comments. I don't respond to them normally, but it just shows the ignorance, because that person, if they're not a firefighter, probably thinks that we work 40 hours a week. And this is the thing. I did a talk to the Florida Professional Firefighters Association a while ago, and Walt Dix just came on, our vice president, and he actually said he remembered me talking this, and I these are the numbers that really get people thinking. So we talk about 1 day on, 2 days off. I work 10 days a month. And we're kind of putting this false rhetoric out because we just believe it. Because when you get hired, and then years later when I got hired, it was a coveted position that we fought really hard to get. So no one was questioning working environment and that kind of thing. But when you do the maths, a normal work day for probably the guy that was talking about cards is an 8-hour day with a 1-hour lunch. So they're 9 hours, but 8 hours actually working. Well, 24 is 3 working days. So of which the third day is from midnight to shift change. So you actually work 3 days on, 1 day off, which when you extrapolate across a year is 364 days a year. So all you're asking is for the person that wakes up at 3 a.m, slides down a pole, bunkers up, gets in the back of a rig, drives, to the fire, lights and sirens, gets out, throws a 24, makes entry into a burning building, does a right-hand search, finds a child, pulls them out, doffs their gear, and starts working a pediatric cardiac arrest algorithm. You're just saying, can that person have the same amount of hours as a barista or someone in the supermarket?
Correct.
I don't think it's that much to ask personally, but because we told this fallacy, and because the public still thinks that we sit around petting a Dalmatian, we get that bullshit rhetoric. And that's probably the same guy that huffs and puffs because they spelt his name wrong on the fucking Starbucks cup. It's that guy anyway. But regardless, what we're asking is to create an environment that forges performance. And the same thing, and I want to get your take on the fitness side, but we're not asking for more time off so we can watch more, Jerry Springer reruns.
No, 100%.
We're asking for an environment that when that call comes out and we have to go and save your child, that we don't miss them on that sweep as we do in a right-hand search because we can't even see straight because we're so damn tired.
Correct. 100%. 100%.
So what about from a strength and conditioning point of view? I think that as we are now changing the work weeks and therefore forging an environment for performance, this is the perfect time to finally put a punitive fitness standard in there. Now, use the word punitive. It's not setting out to punish people, but just setting a standard to be adhered to, the same way as you and I, when we went to Fire Academy, when we had to climb stairs and go through collapse mazes, that was expected. If you don't do it, okay, no problem. You don't have to do it, but you're just not a firefighter. So I think this really is finally an opportunity for us to double down on firefighter health and fitness by putting in standards, just like an ocean lifeguard, just like a Navy SEAL, that if you can't reach, that's fine. Then you're going to go to fire prevention until you can reach it again. So what is your perspective on fitness standards or creating that strength and conditioning culture, so we're not talking about us dying less, but we're actually forging an elite level of performance? So when you go up that high rise with 100 pounds of gear, you're not tapping out on the 8th floor.
Right. And that's one of those conversations that goes south really quickly around the table, right? And the reason for it is the military has standards, don't they?
Yep.
Of course they do.
Especially the higher tiers that are really parallel to police, fire, EMS.
Our standards are in respect to passing a physical agility test. And then once you pass that physical agility test, you will never have to pass a test ever in your career, ever again, right? And so we know these people that they barely make it through the academy. And I mean barely, right? Skin of their teeth. And then they just drop out. They just never do anything again. And the question is, do they have to? I was at a NSCA conference, and I was not necessarily the voice of reason. I was trying to be the contrarian, but I was trying to basically stir up the hornet's nest for the conversation. And the speaker said, you have to be fit to fight fire. That's what he said. You have to be fit to fight fire. And I said, no, you don't. And of course, everybody looked at me like, what are you talking about? And so the conversation started. And the reason I said that is because some of the best firefighters that I've ever worked with in my life never did a push-up. They could take that 1 3/4 off the truck, go in 400 feet inside a warehouse, fully bunkered, heavy black smoke, zero visibility, and put that fire and come out and go smoke a cigarette. That is the truth, right? You probably had those guys on your department. We certainly have them. So the truth is, no, you do not have to be fit to fight fire. The examples are world, pretty much around the world as the example. That doesn't mean that you don't have to be fit to survive the event. You do, because that's where we lose. Again, the firefighter brother I spoke to who passed away after a 48-hour shift. We had many of those. When did those events happen? Not necessarily during the event, but after, in the recovery period. And there's a lot of research that has to do with that. So the whole point was, again, to stir the hornet's nest, to have conversation, because I could see everybody was just, one-minded with respect to that. But that always brought to me the situations, whether it was my department or other departments in the state of Florida, or wherever we taught, where a lot of the guys that did train and spent time trying to improve their fitness for the job wanted a standard. Some departments didn't, because they realized a standard meant that I'd have to fire everybody in the department. And the union protected those because we have to protect the brothers. And I get both sides of that. But nothing wrong with having a standard. Phoenix, when I was teaching for the IFF, had what I thought was really a model program, which was their wellness fitness initiative. And it started with their medical, right? And they had tiers, and I'm going to butcher it a little bit and paraphrase because I don't remember the exact wording or what it was on their contract or their policies. But essentially, once you're physical and tier 1, everything's fine. James, everything's fine. You meet with the doctor after you get your physical. Everything's fine. Blood work's good. You're good to go. Blood pressure's good. you're good to go. You go back on duty. Tier 2, you come back, we have a discussion. James, everything's good, but your pressure's a little bit elevated, right? We'll take it again and see what it is. And your creatine levels are a little bit off. Are you taking creatine, anything? Oh, yeah, okay. Well, just look at those things. I'm going to circle it, follow up with your personal physician. You're back in the truck. Tier 3, you come in, and the conversation changes, right? The conversation is, James, you have some irregularities. Your blood pressure is way above what hypertensive standards are, the 140/90. You're at 170/100. It has not come down. We've taken it a couple of times. Your blood work is off. There's a lot of things going on here. We're going to take you off the truck. And so, of course, that becomes then the union steps in, and there's a conversation, there's a battle to keep James on the truck. Are we doing James a service or disservice by doing that? And you may be saving James's life by doing that, right? Now, They don't just take you off the truck. There's an intervention. And the intervention is you're going to meet with a peer fitness. We're going to assign you to a 40-hour where you can get that blood pressure under control. Then you can come back. Usually it's one pay period, which is a minimum of 2 weeks. Usually it'll be a month for most departments. For us, it would be a minimum of 2 weeks if they take you off, minimum. And for most people, paperwork lagging, somebody's out sick, whatever, it'll take a month. During that time that you report to headquarters, you're going to work with a peer fitness trainer and set you up with a program, meet with a nutritionist. There's an intervention, right? There's a hand holding. It's not just letting you go out by yourself. There's a hand holding. Tier 4, same thing, but now it is a condition of your employment. Okay. You're so severely out of weight. You weigh 400 pounds. By the way, this 400-pound person has been riding the trucks this whole time, right? Literally a cardiac event waiting to happen. And we know that from the science. It is a condition of your employment that you have to meet with a peer fitness trainer. You have to meet with a nutritionist. You have to come in and work out 3 times a week during that 40-hour. If you don't do that, then you get terminated. You get a one chance kind of mea culpa. Okay, I'll do it for real this time. And if that doesn't happen, then you get terminated. You don't get reclassified. You get terminated, right? And when I asked the guys at Phoenix how many of those people ended up at Tier 4, the answer was very, very little. And the people that got terminated were the people that should have been terminated long before they got to Tier 4. The problem is nobody paid attention. They skated through the system, ended up at a small, station in their battalion that doesn't run many calls. Sometimes it's the airport where people hide, right? But they skated through the system, and now we own them, right? Should those people get pushed out and maybe reclassified or stuff? I don't know. I don't know what the answer to that is. I do know that I do believe 100% that we do save lives when we do that. They may not want their lives saved, but we certainly do save lives. And I asked Orlando Pena, who was our wellness fitness coordinator for a long time and ran our wellness center, a good friend. I love him dearly. He's just a good guy. How many people did we save us with just doing, physicals? And he said, well, last count was something like 45 or 46. What does that mean? That means had they not had a county physical, they would have died, right? Whether it be a cardiac event or whatever it was, cancer, something, many times cancer is found in those. And then add the physical component to that, where you're now allowing physical fitness and you're providing a program. And now we're talking apples and apples and not apples and oranges when it comes to wellness fitness. Do we need a standard? I think a standard would be good. We have a CPAT, right? Orange County, I know you're familiar with Orange County because Reedy Creek was right there. They did a version of the CPAT. They added a couple different events and they increased the time and they put their personnel through it. It's very passable. It's not something that you can't do. And very few people did not pass it because they basically give you the answer to the test. You know when the test is coming. So even if you just prepare for the test for 2 or 3 months before, you're preparing for the test 2 or 3 months before, and hopefully that develops fitness habit and whatever happens after that. But we don't have a standard, and there's standards that exist in all those kind of physical jobs for a reason. It's not meant to push people out. It's meant to let people understand that there is a standard. It is a physically demanding job. It is a young man's job in the fire service. Once we raised the drop from 5 to 8 years, and now I know the police department is going to 10. Now we're talking, if we raise that to 10 years, we're going to have 62, 63, 65-year-old guys riding engines. That's an accident waiting to happen already, right? Cardiovascularly wise. You're not the same you don't have the same cardiovascular system as when you were 20, right? You may have plaque, your CAC may be a little bit different. Why not? Why not have a standard that you can meet and let you know that, hey, before your time comes mentally, which is usually late for everybody, physically, you're probably turning a corner. And I think we feel it because you'll see people, we have a bid system. You see people bidding operations into 40-hour jobs. Right? Those are people that get to a point where they may not doing the job anymore. They've realized the financial aspect of I can make the same money, but not risk myself. And we have many of those people that realize physically, I can't do this job anymore, right? We have trucks going to fires sometimes 2 or 3 times a day. So you go to a warehouse fire, your day's not over. You have 14 hours to go. You run 2 more house fires during that time. That is a physical toll on the system. Most people on this planet will never understand what that's like. And it is a physical toll, and you better have a good cardiovascular system. Your respiratory system better be good, right? Your muscular system better be good, because it's going to be taxed. A standard lets people know where you're at, and at the very least, lets you start making increments into an improvement where you can survive the event.
Well, this parallels the mental health conversation. If you set that standard at the front door, we're on the back foot with everyone that's already got 10, 15, 20 years on. And there has to obviously be not a grandfathering in, but an on-ramp. You can't come in and say the 400-pounder, right, you got a week. You're going to have to be fair. So, I would argue what a year, 18 months, whatever it looks like.
Sure.
But at the same time, you have to have a line of demarcation where at the moment, can you do the job? If we do get that high-rise fire, would that kid die because you couldn't make it up there? Okay, well, then that's a problem. So for now, you do need to come off, go to 40 hours, get some sleep, regulate your hormones. Let's get you, where you're losing weight. But, that standard, and I've said this a lot because, you and I have even talked about this. Sometimes people will be like, okay, we're going to do a fitness standard. And they'll be like, all right, we're going to do a vertical jump. We're going to do a max deadlift. We're going to hold on, time out. We've already got the implements that we need built into a CPAT or the FPAT with the fire sled. And it's a very fair thing. And I worked for Orange County for 5 years. So we had the IPAT, which is the kind of like
iPad, right?
CPAT with training wheels, and honestly, it was too easy. It really was. I don't think you did any weight on the stair climb, and to me, the CPAT is a great way of just holding that every year. At 46 years old, I did the CPAT because I wasn't sure if I was going to be able to pay bills when I left the fire service to do the podcast, and so I kind of just was preparing in case I need to go back in again. And at 46 years old, I did the CPAT in 7 minutes 20 seconds.
Respectable.
So if my old ass can do it at at that 3 minutes less than the standard, I don't think it's unfair to say, all right, just hold the CPAT standard every year. That is your thing. No one can say it's unfair. No one can say it's not related to the job. It doesn't matter if you're male, female, gay, straight, 18, 55. You either can or you can't. And that way, as you said, you start getting to a point where you're like, oh shit, either A, I can't, or B, I don't want to anymore, which is another, conversation.
100%. Yes.
Then you can work, okay, do I need to go to admin? Do I need to go to, training? But if it's a position where you're not riding the rig in an emergency anymore, that changes things. Or I've done 20 years, 25 years. Maybe it is time. Maybe I shouldn't do the drop. Because like you said, what good is that money if you do the drop and then right when you're done, you drop. Yeah, you drop dead. And now all that, pension savings was for nothing. So by putting a fitness standard in, the delivery of service to the general public, is high, but also your
Sure.
longevity is high. That whole, unofficial statistic of 5 years after retirement that we die, that's horrendous. You've worked 20, 25, in your case, 35 years. Now I want you to have the same in retirement. But if your job is killing you, obviously we're not doing it right. So you might say it's unfair for a fitness standard, but it goes back to when we were in Fire Academy. Can you imagine saying, this is unfair? Why do we have to climb those stairs?
No, yeah, it doesn't work that way.
So, no.
I applaud Orange County for the iPad. It is, if you want to call it a CPAP with training wheels, that's a good way to kind of characterize it. But at least they had something, right, where many departments weren't even willing to go there. So I thought they did a good job at least saying, hey, we have something. And I was teaching a class there when they were having an iPad. And I think it was lunchtime. There was an intermission. So I went out there and looked at it. And I asked him, so like, what is the attitude of the guys coming in? He goes, well, you can see that there's the guys going through it now that he's tried everything in the world to not go through it. And eventually the department said, listen, you got to go through it. And passed it, but wasn't happy. You can see he took off his stuff and just kind of left, and everybody else was kind of gathering around and whatever. So you're not going to have everybody buy in, but you're going to have to do it. That's what it is, right? Right now, if we have that guy who's clinically obese, we know just based on the obesity, the size, how slow he is, right? The fact that he's just completely winded after one set of stairs. We don't really have a plan. The plan is, I hope he makes it. That's not a good plan, right? That's the plan across the country right now. I hope he makes it. So those guys, they kind of self-regulate. Those are the guys that start bidding out from high-rise areas to low-lying, residential areas because the stress is less, and eventually get to a point where a 40-hour job opens and they're gone. They're gone. They self-regulate, but not everybody does. Some people just keep bouncing. They don't hold biz. They just bounce around the county and they hide for 20 or 30 years. And then we get to that 20-year, an additional 5 years or 3 years to drop is 8 years now. They add 2 more. Now you can stay 10 years after a 25-year career, right? Should everybody stay? I'm not your typical firefighter that leaves as a captain after 35 years. I'm in a completely different realm, but I make it my job to be what I am and to do what I do, right? It allowed me to stay the 35 years. But even me at that point realized I'm not 20 anymore, right? The midnight calls hurt a lot more. Those calls where I ran all night and the next day I have to run an NFL combine were the hardest days, some of the hardest days of my life. They're very difficult because they were done in zero sleep. And the next day is 100 miles per hour. That's what the NFL combine is, training guys for the combine. Or NFL off season. Many days of 2 or 3 days of very little sleep, 3 hours of sleep between 72 hours. But I got to go work, right? That's my business. I have these guys that make a lot of money dependent on me. You really start to learn really quickly that doing both is asinine, but I never knew anything less. That's what I'd done my whole life. But I recognize probably at year 20, maybe year 22, that I just didn't recover the same. It doesn't matter what I did, sleep-wise, Normatec boots, nootropics, supplementation, diet. It wasn't the same. The body's just not the same. So I think some people start realizing that at that point in time. I even thought of, instead of a 25-year career, make it 20 with a 3 or 5 year drop. Let people go when they realize it's time to go. Most of our guys stay for the money. 100%. You probably know that to be true. People stay in a drop longer for the money. I certainly did. There was there's a quota that I wanted to meet. Plus I had some projects that I was working on for the department with ocean rescue, with the lifeguards, that I wanted to implement and complete before I left. And I'm very grateful, knock on wood, that I was able to complete that stuff. So I had the carrot and the stick wasn't necessarily money, it was projects also. But maybe lower that to 20 years so that you can leave younger. And to your point, you don't retire after, a 10-year drop and you drop that dead 3 years after that. Well, what was the point of that, right? I've always told people that the drop is not free, right? Those extra years that you get from 25 to 30 aren't free. You're exchanging life hours for that money. It's not free. And so whatever price you pay for it, whatever the amount the state puts in every month for you on top of a paycheck, it's not free. You're earning that money. You are exchanging life hours for that money. I've had that conversation with multiple people who within a week to a month of having that conversation retired because of that conversation. I said, George, and I'll give you just a quick example of walking to our station, had a battalion chief. And I walked in and I said, hey, how much more you got to go? He goes, I got like 16, 18 months. I'm like, oh, all right, you're around the corner. And so we're talking about the drop. And I said, the drop's not free. You're exchanging life hours for that drop. And he sort of had this deer in the headlights look. And I went on vacation and came back, and he was a CR guy. So every 3 weeks he was there. And I didn't see him back in those 3 weeks. And somebody said, oh, he retired. And I go surfing one day, he's out there, and I look at him, I just laughed. He goes, I had that conversation with you. That night, my wife and I were talking, and the next day he was at another station, and his wife called, and she says, what's going on? And he says, I don't want to be here anymore. And she said, well, what do you mean? You got 18 months. And she goes, no, I'm exchanging life hours every time I come to work, and I don't have that much left. I think I'm going to go. And she says, go. And he did. He left the raid and the keys, and he was gone that same day. So I've heard that multiple times. So some people get to that point where they realize that they're exchanging life hours for that money. What's the one constant that you can't buy or replace? And it's time, right? Money comes and goes. Money may or may not make a difference, but time, you're just giving up that time. So I think more and more people are leaving earlier, but make it financially feasible for them to do so we don't have 65-year-old guys running a truck, right?
This is what's crazy as well. When I left, and I didn't plan to leave, it was, the last department that I had, trying to make change, getting nothing but pushback, going to firefighter funerals and realizing, all right, I'm not going to change it from within. Jocko was on the show. Oh, you just have to promote. Like, no, you don't. There's agencies where they're grooming the same person, over and over again. You're not going to fix it from in there. So I transitioned out to speak for the fire service and cashed out my retirement, and financially just fucked myself, but it doesn't matter because I did it deliberately, because I'm like, all right, well, the lives of the fire service are more important to me than what I figure out later in life financially. But what really blew me away is when I had the realization that why do we even stay that amount of time? Because a pension company, a financial organization told you have to stay for 20 years or 25 years. Not Correct. Because it's burning in your heart to keep working. And it really hit me when I saw how many even young firefighters had those damn countdown apps on their phones.
Yes.
And I'm like, what a horrible, horrible mindset to be like, oh, well, only, 6.5 years left. And I never got to that point.
When you go, right?
Exactly. So, rather than this pension saying you have to stay or drop or whatever, like, when are you ready to go? Because if you and I were in the military, especially you, I mean, God, you 35 years, you blow people away, but 14 years for me, coming out the military, people are like, wow, that's amazing. Thank you for your service. But what do they say to a firefighter? Well, why'd you quit? You know 100%. What I mean? Now, most 100%. Of us in the first responder professions have actually done a lot more, in the meat grinder than a lot of our military members that don't see combat. but the mindset is completely different. So it's really looking in the mirror and going, when are you ready? Because the moment you're begrudging going to work, the moment you're so beat down or you're getting mandatory and you miss really important events with your children, maybe that's the time. That's what I did. Like I moved from Orange County to Reedy Creek because they were telling me, mandatory me, and I was a single dad. Like, James Gearing, you can't go home to your son. I'm like, the fuck I can't. All right, well, I guess we're done then. I'm just tested with this new department. I guess I'm out of it. Thanks for forcing me out. So, I think it is an important conversation to people to step back and go, am I staying because of a financial, matrix that I'm following? Or am I staying because I still love the job? And if those line up, then you end up with, a long, fruitful career and you make it all the way to the end. But if they don't line up, don't mistake the fact that you can then go and do something completely different, still make a difference in the world, but also spend time with your family.
I get asked that question, not a lot, but sometimes. And for me, it was, I had the last 10 years of my career, the ideal work situation, right? I work with a bunch of people that I respected and that I loved. I had a great battalion chief. I've been there so long that he was a rookie in one of my classes, and now he was my battalion chief. But we had a fireboat there. We had a platform, an engine. We had the rescue. On one side of the station is the ocean, and the other side is the bay. Me being a waterman, there just couldn't be anything better, right? Fish, surf in the mornings, not a very busy station. So it was ideal for me to do what I needed to do. When I identified a weakness that Ocean Rescue, who is under the heading of Miami-Dade, I identified a weakness that we had after running calls with them, and I wanted to correct and improve and eliminate that weakness. And it took me a while, but I was given the liberty and the freedom to do so in between calls, and that's what I did. So I loved going to work. I loved going to work. I've never loved going to work as much as I did at that station. I always loved the job, didn't necessarily always loved going to work, right? This was different. This is loving the job. It's a high-rise area. It's different firefighting. It's different aspects of challenge. But I loved going to work, and I loved going to work with the people that I did. Every dinner was a solving of the world's problems over and over and over again, only to start back at the beginning. So those things, I am not a typical example. I'm an outlier when it comes to that. But I think that's a really valid point is, and I love the analogy of the calendar because everybody has it, right? Your life is kind of dictated by that calendar. Hey, I only have 3 years, 4 months, and 56 days to go. Whether it should be like have I self-actualized in this job, right? Have I met the needs that I want financially, emotionally, otherwise? And if you have, what I tell people now is do the math. Do the math. If the math adds up for you, go. Don't wait. If the math adds up to you to where you want to be financially, then an additional $200,000 or $300,000 isn't going to make a difference, right? What is going to make a difference is that you leave at 20 and you have literally another career. You have 15, 20 years left to do something else. So leave when the numbers add up for you. Before, I used to have a battalion chief that was a financial advisor. And he was very, very adamant that you could not leave the drop early because you were leaving money on the table, right? Like, that money is yours. You should take it, right? It doesn't belong to the county, it belongs to you. You should take it. And made sense until I started getting, he was probably one of the first 10 years of my career, I worked with him. So later, subsequently, I kind of grew up and started to realize that, no, you don't leave when the drop is over. You leave when you leave, for whatever reason. So when I went to sign up for the drop, the guy that was kind of counseling me and going through all that stuff, I asked him, hey, so out of that 5-year drop, what is the average amount of time that people stay? And he said, 2.5 years. It wasn't 4 years. It wasn't 5 years. That meant that people stayed. They got a little bit more money. And then they realized, I don't have to come to work anymore. I'm technically retired. And so they leave. And they leave with whatever they have. And they figure, you know what? We'll figure it out. I have never seen anybody leave early, not figure it out. And two, feel like I have to go get another job because financially didn't make it. That doesn't happen. So what that means is you can leave early and you're going to be fine. Number one, financially. Number two is leave because you can, not because you're being forced out of, or because you hit a quota. In my defense, when it comes to that, I did have a quota, but only because it allowed me to do the amount of work that I needed to do to complete the programs I needed with Ocean Rescue. And then it ended up being the financial quota I needed. I had lost some money. I think it's 2008, whenever the market dropped, I lost quite a bit of money. So I thought, well, this is an opportunity to build it back up. My financial advisor said, hey, this is a great time for you to build that money back up. And it worked out. But leave when you can, not just when the calendar says you can, for 1,000 different reasons. And I think that I would say somewhere between 15 and 20 years is when you start to realize that the job takes a heavy toll on you physically and mentally. And certainly by 20 years, unless you've been hiding, you felt every ounce of that weight. Probably a good time to tap out, go do something else, enjoy life. Cardiovascular, you're probably less of a risk, obviously. Yeah, there's a huge difference between leaving when the calendar says so, excuse me, and when you decide, you know what, it's time.
Well, speaking of ocean lifeguards, that's one of the groups that I use as a parallel for fitness standards. I was a lifeguard, never in the ocean, but I did open water and pools and theme parks and stuff. But yeah, we were constantly held to a standard. We were constantly not only fitness training, but we were doing recertifications and qualifying swims and all that stuff. So talk to me about the standards the ocean lifeguards are held to.
Well, they simply have a standard, right? You can't swim, you can't be a lifeguard. It's pretty simple. They have what is probably considered now the standard, not to double tap on that word, but of run, swim, run, right? Where you run 100 yards, you swim out 500 yards, you swim back, you run another 100 yards to the next. I just read, I think it was City Pompano Beach, physical standards. And it's essentially what they do every single day. You run from one lifeguard tower to the other one because you get on the radio and you say, hey, I have a person drowning in front of tower 2. So you run from tower 1 over or tower 3 over, and then you swim out. The buoy is at usually 500 yards. So most people don't go past the buoy. So you're running at least 50, 100 yards, and then you're swimming out at least, I would say, 100 to 200 yards, if not 300. And then you're bringing the body back, right? Assisting somebody back. It's not that simple. Yes, we have jet skis and we have longboards. Some people have the rowboats. Forgot what they call them. So all that's well and fine as adjuncts, but physically, you're going to have to go out and swim. That's the standard. You have to swim. I've had guys that I know that were swimmers that didn't pass the test. In fact, one of the people on my truck, her son was a swimmer, had been a collegiate swimmer, and failed the test because he didn't realize that run aspect would be so demanding. And then in some of those portions, you do CPR, you stop and you do CPR, and it's a continuation of things. So the simple answer to that is there's a standard, right? In order to be a lifeguard, you have to know how to swim. Is there a standard for a firefighter? You need to learn how to go up stairs or carry heavy weight and all that stuff. Yes, that's a CPAP. So your point before, a test already exists, but is that the test then for the incumbents? And that was always the conversation with Orange County, where they felt that test was not representative of the incumbents and should be sort of have training wheels. And that's how I guess they ended up, and not to speak for them because I don't know what they're doing now, but back then it was the iPad. I think they still have it. Many departments have a similar iPad. It's not the test that they give candidates. The incumbents are like, let's just go a little bit easier so everybody passes the test. But we need a standard. Like we absolutely need a standard.
Well, I know Orange County, when I was there, the iPad wasn't punitive. What they had that was very progressive was they had what they call the fit truck, which I think is not there anymore. I think it was disassembled, but that was great. That did everything from, plyometric strength testing
I loved it.
Really, really good. And then they had a club. I think it was, I forget, it was under 8 minutes, something like that. But anyway, if you could do the CPAT in a pretty, elite time, then you got this coveted T-shirt. You were part of this kind of top tier club. So those were good. You take something, a little bit more basic, and then you make it challenging and have, set the bar, and people that have pride in their job, they would train and reach that. But I know it wasn't punitive because my lieutenant, who was a Mountain Dew drinking, chain smoking gentleman, did it, I think, with a cigarette in his mouth and in flip-flops. So they certainly weren't holding them to it, as far as you went through it. Your time didn't really mean anything. So it was kind of box checking in a way. But, again, let's put it back in the ocean lifeguard setting. All right, well, this is your fitness test, but now we've got an incumbent test. So here's some water wings because you're 30. And we need to make it easier for you. Now go swim out to that person with water wings on. I think that sounds ridiculous in any other profession. Oh, you're a Navy SEAL, but you're a 30-year-old Navy SEAL? Okay, we're going to give you a styrofoam gun because the real gun's really heavy. Like, it doesn't work in any other setting. If you are wearing the uniform, responding to the same calls as the 18 and 22-year-olds, then you should be held to the same standards. And then once you can't, which hopefully will be when you're ready to step out anyway, then and only then you'd be like, all right, well, I don't want to do this. I'm going to go to a desk now. But the as we say, the fire doesn't care if you're gay, straight, black, white, 18, neither's the ladder, neither's the hose. You have to be able to do the thing. And the only prejudice that's actually worth a shit in the fire service is if you can or if you can't. That's it.
And what it does is it also gives you a better candidate, right? The candidate knows that there is a standard to be met every single year. It's not the same that we have right now, which is just, we have 10,000 people applying, when the open enrollment starts for the Miami-Dade jobs. That 10,000 will be whittled down really, really quick, and by a vast amount of numbers and people, when they know that the standard is what the standard is people are just not going to apply because I don't want to have to deal with that. I'm not the kind of person. Hey, do you train? Well, I don't really train that much, but you do the job. How long have you been here? 10 years? Oh, I can do that. But if you start seeing that, and it is a young person's job, there's no question about it, which by nature you're fitter already, right? Or we think. But once that happens, your candidate is automatically going to be a better fitter candidate because the people are applying know what the standard is. They're going to train to the standard and they're going to keep to the standard while they're on the job. And at some point, that same person, that could be me, where I noticed at some point, I just don't recover the same way I did before. Maybe it's time to kind of go do something else. In my case, I just changed the way I did things. I was already kind of in a high-rise area. I just went to a slower station, and I could have gone even to a slower station. I just didn't because I liked where I was. But it changes the dynamics of how you pick where you're at in the job itself. So it gives us a better candidate overall. No question about that. You can't come in and just pass the test and skate through 25 years. You will not be allowed that. Your body will not allow that anymore.
The Royal Marines in the UK had a commercial when I was younger, and it showed some of the stuff that they do. And then at the end, it just simply said 99% need not apply.
I love it.
I thought that was genius because the only people that are going to step up are like, oh, really? Yep, exactly. And that's how we should have it in the fire service.
It sells itself. And we don't have that. We just, we open the doors when open enrollment starts for taking in applications, and everybody applies, and we eliminate people doing background checks and all that stuff. But there's a lot of people get in that you look at them, and we do have we've been hiring a lot of people. Some of our classes are 90, 120 within 3 months. Like, it's a lot of people. I was talking to a guy at a conference 2 weeks ago, and he said, well, we just hired 10. We just hired 150 people within the last 3 weeks, right? That it's just, they're young. They look fit, but not everybody does. I can see people in some of these classes that are going to probably not ever do a push-up ever again. And now we own them, good, bad, or indifferent. These are the people that are riding the truck with you that you're eventually, without any question, putting your life in their hands. And that is another topic of the conversation, is do you trust the person next to you when you look across that rig? The answer is no. That's a problem. It should be 100%. Yeah, man, that guy can do it, or she can do it. We have females that I know can do the job. There's no question about it. I've seen it. I've seen them outwork a man. So that aspect of women can't do the job. Yeah, no, they can. So this applies male or females, tall, short, doesn't matter what it is. The standard should be the standard. And I love that 99% need not apply. It sells itself.
Absolutely. One of my guests said something recently, and I can't remember who it was now, but it was so profound. They said, the problem is, some people are afraid to be tired. And I thought about that. And so imagine again, that person who's pushing back, that, is whining to their union about fitness standards and everything. The only thing that person is fearing is exercising and being tired. So when you take a step back and take that same mindset, the person who's too scared to even get on a rowing machine or go for a run is the one that's backing you up as you go interior on a fire, or maybe it's the person that has your back and that combative patient that starts wailing on you. Like, that's the one that's scared of a dumbbell. So when you put it that way, it really does reframe it. If you're not prepared to put the work in to simply be fit enough to be a firefighter, what does that mean as far as your ability to do the job when shit really hits the fan and we're interior and we just got a ceiling collapse? Are you going to be able to step up? You're going to rise to your level of expectations, or are you going to fall to your level of training?
And the answer is no. These are the people that go outside the building and say they have a leak in their mask. I'm sure you've heard that, right? Yeah, my mask is leaking. Yeah, that's the mask leakers. Those are who those people are. But I'll add to that some people are afraid of hurting, because the training that you need to do this job is going to hurt sometimes. And so if you're immune to the fact that you're going to hurt, it's just a normal part of this job, you'll be okay. But if the moment that hurt steps in and you decide to tap out by saying that you have a leak on your mask, that's not the job for you. Like, you're not that person. And I love that. I just add to it a little bit, or change that a little bit more. And some people are just afraid to hurt. And that's hurt in training, interval training, which I love for the fire service, because it teaches recoverability. It raises a ceiling of what your cardiovascular system can do. So I love interval training for the fire service because it teaches recovery. It teaches the heart exactly what we do in the fire service. We go balls to the wall, and then we go back to the station. That is what interval training is. Is it all the time? No, there's long, slow distance training is needed to build that base and start pushing that ceiling. But I think people are just adverse to the pain of training, the pain of the job, knowing that, when you put on that gear and you put that tank on your back and you grab a tool, that's 65 pounds extra. That hurts, right? But if you're immune to that, you realize that it's just part of what we do, then it allows you to carry on in a different way, completely different way. That's not everybody. That's not a lot of people.
I want to hit that one more topic and then we'll close out. But just before we do, the 10,000 applicants, are those certified, or is that a non-cert hiring?
Most of those non-cert, because we have our own academy.
Okay.
There are academies that if we have an exodus of people, it's easier obviously to hire certified, because we do basically a 6-week class. Really, it's a 6-week. This is how we do things at this department, and then they're on the rig. But most of those are going to be the 5-month academy, because we'll take them as fresh no skills, and then we'll teach you the Miami-Dade way, and then you get on the truck, which we prefer.
Okay. I won't linger on that because I want to hit one more area and be mindful of your time. With that being said, the red line workouts, the pain caves, they're I believe there is absolutely a place for that. And whether it was CrossFit or whether it's just a lot of the stuff I do now, which is sleds and sandbags and, very, very fireground related movements, you can absolutely find that, that bar within yourself. But obviously you don't need to be doing that, 4 or 5 times a week either. But you don't want the last time that you really were in that dark place to be 14 years ago in the fire academy either. So
correct.
We touched on this before we hit record. Talk to me about when we should be really finding that suffering in a workout, and then contrast that with the importance of rest and recovery and intensity and training when you're actually at the station.
So to me, never on duty. And I've got literally, out of teaching just for the IFF for, I think it was 18, 19 years, tons of stories, personal anecdotes. There thousands of stories at this point why it's such a bad idea. And I'll give you one of mine personal. Is when I worked for a small department before I got to Miami-Dade, we had the new Precor treadmills, brand new. Like, we took the plastic off of them. Not a really busy department. We had really fit guys, though. The only kind of overweight guys were the drivers. Everybody else was very, very fit. And we had some drivers that were actually very fit. So that's not a fair statement. But we started doing something, usually it was after lunch, before dinner. We used to have interval training competitions on the Precor. You could set the Precor and it would give you an interval training workout, and you completed it in a certain amount of time. And so we used heart rate monitors and we tested each other, and it got to be where the entire station was doing this, right? And it would leave you pretty depleted. I remember right after that workout, most guys would go straight to the dinner table and pig out, take a shower, and go to bed. They were done. We usually didn't run a call after midnight, including myself. So that was sort of my routine. Kind of towel down a little bit in the locker room, change shirts, but not take a shower because dinner was already on the table. And while the second to the last person is on that treadmill, the alarm goes off for a high-rise fire. And we kind of looked at each other. You're on alarm ringings all the time, right? Usually false alarm. And the bay doors open, and the moment the bay doors open, I smelled it. And I thought, oh boy, we're in trouble. And it was a high-rise fire. It was a fire on the 23rd floor of a high-rise. One apartment fully involved, the other one was catching already. What that means is work, right? You're going to go to work. We got our gear on and started doing stuff, and my heart rate had to have been at 95%, for sure. It felt like I was going to beat out of my chest, and we were just starting the job. Fought the fire. Day was over, and we were sitting, kind of recovering. And I looked around. Everybody felt and looked the same way I did. And we talked a little bit about, oh, that was a bad idea, right? Doing red line training. And that was a 24, 48-hour shift. Go home, come back. And there wasn't a single person in the gym before dinner. That was the last day we ever did that workout. We learned, right? Lesson learned is you can do some stuff, right? You can do long, slow distance kind of training, zone 2. You can do some circuit training. You might be able to do even light intervals. But you have to remember that the purpose of you being there is to do the job of a firefighter. It's not to work out. Working out just allows you the capability to do the job. So a conversation was, hey, remember what we're here to do, right? We're here to do the job. And if we train this way on duty, we're not going to be able to respond the way we did. I can tell you that we were very grateful after that fire that we didn't have a single call, because I don't think a single person would have been able to perform. We'd have to get mutual aid for sure. There's just no way. you were depleted. And if anybody would be in a position to have a cardiac event, that's when it would have happened. Because not only did you put yourself through a cardiac event, now the fire put you through another one. And it was a lesson I learned. I never ever trained that way ever again on the job. If you ask me, have you trained the job? Hundreds of thousands of hours, but nothing like that. It was always mobility stuff. It was light strength work, accessory muscle stuff, assault bike workouts, but the intervals were 10 to 15 minutes. Nothing that I couldn't recover from. Always wore a heart rate monitor to make sure I had recovery in mind. We've had some guys do CrossFit workouts. Love CrossFit. If you love CrossFit or High Rocks, more power to you. I don't think it's the right kind of workout to do. Sleds, sandbags on duty, absolutely. Only because I've seen what red line type workouts do to firefighters subsequent to response. The conversation changes if you're 20 versus you're 45, right? 20, you've been on for 2 years, and the 45-year-old guy's been on for 15 is not the same body. So I've seen guys get smart as time goes on and change their workouts to more recovery aspect workouts, not necessarily stimulating workouts. When I did the 24-48, my first day off, if I didn't sleep well, if I even got up once, I did not work out. That was my long, slow distance day. That was my zone 2 day. That was my mobility day. Then I had a full sleep cycle of 8 to 10 hours. That is my compound strength and conditioning day, or strength day, I would say. And what I did do, which is something I've always taught, is I don't go off a 7-day cycle. I go off an 8 or 9 day cycle. That way, the envelope of my week gets expanded and I can put in more things. If you're trying to do a 24-48 and you're trying to fit in 3 strength workouts and 3 cardiovascular workouts, you're squeezing a lot of things in. By the way, you have 3 shifts within those 9 days, right? It's too much. At 20, you're good. So what I did is I expanded that window into an 8 or 9 day cycle. And then I can take complete days off. If I got to work, some days I went to work, I did absolutely nothing except run calls and eat and, go do some training and stuff like that. And then I would take my days off and use those as my training days. So that's sort of what I did. It's my first day off. If I slept through the night, then I could train that day. But my second day was usually my strength conditioning day. So I usually would do 3 to 4 days of strength work within an 8 or 9 day cycle, and usually 2 cardiovascular long slow distance days and 1 VO2 max, what I call the Norwegian 4x4. Back then it was just long intervals or short intervals. And that's sort of how it worked out for me. Enough time to train and rest and do the job. That makes sense.
Yeah. No, it does completely. And this is the thing. I mean, even the down regulation of the nervous system, I learned this the hard way. I used to think, well, I'll just go sweat out the stress. And then I realized one day after talking to Jeff Nichols, like, what am I doing? I'm adding stress to stress. I just ran 4 calls last night, and then I'm getting all pissed off because I can't get a snatch to stay over my head. And I just went for a run. And after the run, I was like, oh, I feel better. Okay, now I think I understand it. So yeah, it's not saying that you can't work out, no, 100%. You should work out. But yeah, like on a 24-48, the second part of your 48, I agree 100%. That's the one you're most likely to have the recovery to actually push it a little harder, whether it's a max strength day or a red line workout, so that you have got that to lean in. And you have, as you said, been used to the hurt, but that's not, don't do Murphing gear when you're at the station.
No, probably not a good idea. And I would never say, if somebody said in many of the classes, I would say, well, I work out hard on duty. If it works for you and you're recovering, 100%. The question is, how do you know you're recovering? Use an HRV or use HRV or an Oura ring, something that tells you what your HRV is and tells you what your readiness is. If your readiness score says you're ready to go, then go. If it says no, though, then you might want to dial it back a little bit. But I never say never. Even to some people, I redline all the time on duty. Okay, have you had an incident where, and most of the time the answer is no, I've never had an incident, but you potentially could. So have you thought about that? Well, not really. So most of these are young, people in the fire service, which is a different mentality than someone who's been in 45 years as a veteran running the truck for 10 years. So if you can recover from it, 100%. But how do you know you're recovering from it? Because if you're redlining in your workouts, you're running at a busy station, you're not sleeping at night, I don't need your data. I know you're not recovering. I've been doing this a long time. You're not recovering. And you can do that at that age. At our age, we can't. You're gonna leave the job really early.
Absolutely. All right. Well, I want to be mindful of your time. I've been talking for over 2 hours now. So for people listening, if they want to reach out to you, learn more about you, where are the best places online to do that?
Probably Twitter. I'm pretty active on Twitter. I got on Twitter to really share information. I think it was a good platform to share information. I've learned a lot also. And you can reach me there at @Carv Performance. I'm not very active on any of the other ones, but for sure Twitter.
Brilliant. Well, I want to thank you so much. Firstly, congratulations on the retirement. Secondly,
Thanks,
it's
man.
been such an amazing conversation again. We obviously, there's a lot of things that we still haven't talked about, taking a deep dive into the programming and some of the other stuff. So we'll have to do another one down the road. But
For sure.
I think it was important to hear your perspective on mental health, on retirement, on the work week, some of these things that we didn't talk about, I don't think, in that much depth last time. So I want to thank you. So I want to thank you so much for being so generous with your time again and coming back onto the Behind the Shield podcast.
Yeah, man. Always a pleasure, brother.